All right, let's go ahead and continue on. So when we last left off, we had unwrapped all of the katana. So let's go ahead and just exit the UV editor here. And we can actually just convert this to an edible poly. Next thing I'm going to do is go up to my layers here. And let's just keep that open. And then I'm going to say unhide all. And that's going to unhide everything. Let's go ahead and just hide the katana ref because we're not using that. And let's see here. So we've got our pieces right here that we indicated as our duplicates. And before we do that, let's hide our high poly mesh. So now we're just looking at our low poly, and that should have our mirrored pieces over here, and that's what we need to address. So go ahead and start with the blade. And because we had to combine this, we're gonna have to separate these pieces out and rename them to their appropriate names again. So start with the blade. I'm just gonna grab all of the blade here in element mode, detach that, and call it blade underscore low. And we're good on that. So let's go ahead and just focus on fixing this piece. So we have these two pieces here. I'll go ahead and isolate them. So we had this piece that we had detached before we unwrapped it. I'm going to go ahead and delete it because we no longer need it as referenced. And now we just need to go in and select those polygons that that piece was representing. So if you remember correctly, we went into polygon mode. We clicked on by angle of 45, and that got most of the polygons selected. It doesn't grab this one for some reason, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that manually. Turn by angle off, and then just go ahead and click that one. And then let's come down here and grab these polygons. And then we are going to go detach. And this time you want to make sure you detach as a clone. Just like that. And the name's not really important, so just say OK. And let's go ahead and select that object. It should be named something like object 05. Might be different for your case. And the next thing we want to do is we want to go up to the hierarchy button here and affect pivot only and center to object. And then we want to come down here and just right click the top arrow and zero it on X. Puts our pivot right on 0x, and then click that button back off. And so now we have our pivot centered on 0. And then I can come up to here, the mirror button, click it once, and make sure no clone's on and it's mirroring in the x-axis. Okay, so we have this piece now perfectly positioned on this side. So the next thing we want to do is combine these. Oh, sorry, got a little ahead of myself. We want to grab this piece here, throw an unwrap modifier on it, and we want to select all the UVs here that are in our 0 to 1 space. And the reason we're doing that is if you have stacked UVs in most programs, even like in game engines, if they're stacked on top of each other, it introduces errors when it goes to like bake vertex baking, or in our case in Substance Painter when we bake our normal maps, it will cause some issues with the normal map. So we're going to grab all those, and then we're going to click on absolute relative type-ins. Just click that button once, and then in the V attribute here, just type 1, which is 1 unit, and it's going to move everything up 1 unit in our 0 to 1 space, or it's going to be outside of it. But if you could imagine another square here that's 0 to 1, it's sitting in there with the same positioning as it was here. So we're good with that now. So go ahead and collapse this into an edible poly. And now we just need to attach these two pieces together. So we'll first start by selecting our blade underscore low, and then we can just go into our attach list here and grab that piece. So now they're one piece, and then I'm going to go into vertex, select all the vertex, click the weld button here, and let's put in a value of like 0.001, just so we're not welding any vertices that are kind of very close to each other. And you should see it says 322 before and after 280, so that's indicating to us that there's some verts to be welded. So should be good. So I'll go ahead and hit OK to that. Now this piece is one. You can test it by just going into element mode and clicking on it, and it's all one piece. You can also go into border mode and just kind of drag over it like that, and we're going to see a border edge here just because it's an open polygon face, but you shouldn't see any seams along these edges, and if you do, just double check that you mirrored it right and that all your vertex are welded. So that piece is completed. Let's jump out here. We've got this piece here, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'll go ahead and isolate the two, and actually, because we hadn't separated that, it's going to bring that piece with it. So let's go ahead and detach this piece. In this case, we don't want to detach it as a clone. We want to just detach it from the object. And then we have these two pieces here. So I'm going to go jump out of isolation mode. And I'm not completely sure what we named this, so what I'll do is temporarily turn off our low and turn our high on. And I'm going to grab the name that we have here and then hide the high again and then unhide the low. So we'll rename this name that it came generated for us to blade trim, and then just replace the high with low. And let's go ahead and just isolate these pieces again. And we no longer need this piece. This was just reference, so we're going to go ahead and delete that. And then I'm going to go up to my hierarchy. That's the same drill, effect pivot only, center to object, and then right click the top arrow on X to center the pivot on 0x, and mirror it across. Okay. And one thing I didn't do with the blade, and I'm hoping we don't have a problem with it, is when you do any kind of mirroring operation like this, sometimes it will invert the normals. So it's always a good idea to come up here into your Utilities tab and click Reset Xforms, Reset Selected. And if we go into our object properties and turn backface calling on, looks like in this case it was okay, but sometimes it will invert the normals, and you'll be like, as you're looking at this object, if they were inverted, you'd be seeing through the geometry there. So we're okay on that regard. So I'm going to click Re-Xform, click back onto our blade trim low, and go ahead and attach that. Okay, so now that's one piece like it was before. And so we have this piece behind here, right? And we decided we wanted to mirror the UVs to that piece. At the time, I wasn't really thinking about how we would align that. So I think the best thing to do, let's go ahead and start by detaching this piece. And I'll finish my train of thought once we get to this back piece over here. So that makes a little more sense. So let's go ahead and just detach it. And then we'll use the same trick. We'll go up into our layers and hide the low and unhide the high. And let's grab the name off of this and hide the high. Max is being a little slow on me. And let's rename this properly. So we're just going to remove the high at the end of this and replace it with low. Okay. And so I think we'd have some issues basically aligning this piece with our high poly mesh. So my idea is we're just gonna duplicate this geometry and get it aligned with this piece just by eye, and then we're just gonna rebuild the high poly mesh so that we get a perfect alignment of that piece. So let's go ahead and first start by centering this. then I'm going to I'm just going to go ahead and drag this out like so. So we made a copy. So if you hold shift and left click and drag, it'll make a copy. And then what I want to do is grab these two pieces, and I'm going to go into isolation mode and make sure this pivot is centered, it looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this about 180 degrees around. Let's make sure our angle snaps on. Okay. And then let's go into a left view. And you can see there's a little bit of rotation compared to this object. We could try, let me just try this, and this might eliminate us having to do the high poly. If we can rotate this to match this, we should be fine, but it's probably not going to work, but we'll try. Let's click Align, and X, Y, and Z. And I want to see if we turn on rotation. Yeah, it gets a little wonky. It doesn't, that's interesting though. When I hit X though, it almost does kind of grab the rotation of that. Let me just see. That is pretty close. So let's see here. If I go, let's go into wireframe here. I'm going to turn on snaps, and then make sure you have vertex snaps on. And then I'm just going to grab this and also double check that you don't have axis constraints on. Just check that off. I'm going to grab just one of these verts and then snap it right on top. And just looking at this, I think we're in luck. I think we'll be able to get away with that, so we won't have to rebuild the high poly geometry. So what I'll end up doing now is just delete this reference here, the green mesh. I'll just pull it out and delete it, and we've got that perfectly aligned where we need it. One thing we're going to want to do though is, because this is a duplicate of this, we want to go now into the unwrap and grab all the UVs and absolute relative type-ins. Click that once and then move it up 1 unit in V. And that should take care of that piece. So we'll go ahead and convert that to an editable poly. And one last thing we want to do, we need to name this to its appropriate name. So let's so this, because I had this checked right now, when I built this geometry, it duplicated it. It put it in the high poly layer. So you always want to make sure that you have this checked. Typically, you'd want it on 0 default, which is just kind of what Max puts all of the geometry in if you don't have layers. So let's go ahead and just we know what needs to go in the low poly, and we're working out of low poly. So let's go ahead and check that on. And I'm going to go ahead and add that piece to our low poly layer. And then I'm going to turn high poly, let's turn low poly off and high poly back on. And then let's grab the name off of this piece. Okay. And I want to double check here. This is called, they're named the same. Yeah, I believe that is correct. So knowing that, instead of making it a separate piece like we've done, let's go back into our low poly layer, and we just want to attach these two objects together so they can share the same name. So I'll select the first one that's correct, and then I'll go into attach. I'll just click attach this time, and then just click on that piece of geometry, and now those ones are named correctly. All right, so I think that takes care of all of the mirrored pieces. So now we just need to separate these pieces out and name them to the correct naming convention. So we've got this piece right here. So let's start with that. Click on that and detach it. And then let's go ahead and do our little trick here. We're going to layers, hide the low, unhide the high. And then let's grab that name and then hide the high. And then just rename it accordingly. So we're going to replace high at the end of this. Okay. So we've got our other pieces here. And let's separate them out the way they were. So we had the bands. These bands all the way. Make sure you're also, it's always a good idea to move out of translation mode when you're selecting things. So if you hit Q, it'll just put you in selection mode. So, my Max is being a little buggy on me. So let's go through and just select all these pieces. We'll select all the way up to here because this is our unique piece that we did. We'll go ahead and detach that. Make sure it's just detaching and not detaching as a clone. And then we'll go ahead and unhide our high poly mesh. And we'll grab the name right there. A little bit of lag there. Rename this. Remove the high on the end, replace it with low. Okay, that takes care of that piece. And then we have this middle section here. So we'll go ahead and detach that. And then it's kind of the same thing over and over again. And if you have one of those like photographic memories of how we renamed them, you wouldn't have to be jumping between the layers. But this is a little easier, and it kind of alleviates any issues with naming when we go to bake our textures, because sometimes if you name them incorrectly, it just won't know how to bake the high poly geometry onto your low poly. So, all right, let's see. We've got this piece here now. Go ahead and detach that, and we'll unhide our high poly geometry and grab the name on that. Okay. Okay, and then I believe let's just look at. Just trying to think of how we had this. Let's just go into our high real quick. So this hoop right here, and that's a piece, and that's a piece. So those are three different pieces that we have to deal with. So actually, let me hide the low real quick. Reselect those just to make sure. Yeah, three different pieces. Okay. So I'll go ahead and hide. Actually, since we're already here, let's go ahead and let's grab the name off of this one, and we'll do that piece next. And then just hide the high again. A little bit of lag. And let's go into element mode here. And we got to do that on. Okay, I see what we did because we mirrored these UVs, right? So let's go ahead and detach this one. And we can go ahead and just rename it from here because we have that name. And let's put low on the end. Say okay. And let's go ahead and start by deleting this piece because we no longer need it. And we're going to go ahead and go to our hierarchy up here, effect pivot only, center object, and make sure we're in translate mode. And then come to X here and right click on the top arrow to center it on 0. And then just go ahead and mirror that over as a copy in this case, because we want the existing geometry to stay where it is. Okay, so that should be fine. So we have two pieces over here. We have that piece and this piece. And let's go ahead and reset the X-forms on this. Convert to editable poly. Go to object properties. Turn on backface culling. Yeah, and there you go. See, you can see how it inverted the normals on this piece. So what we need to do is just go into element mode, and looks like we have those faces selected. If they're not, just go ahead and select them like that. And then you just want to click under edit elements, just click flip, and that'll flip your faces, normal faces, the correct direction. Okay, and then let's go ahead and throw an unwrap modifier on here. And then we just need to bring these up 1 unit in V. So absolute relative type-ins, 1 unit in V. That takes care of that piece. So we'll go ahead and convert that to an editable poly. And then what we want to do now is let's go ahead and just isolate these. And I'm going to click this one on the left, which is our correctly named geometry, and I'm just going to attach it to the right one here. So now those are one mesh. Okay, so next is the loop. So I'm just going to go ahead and let's just go ahead and hide the low, grab the name of that piece, and then hide the high. There we go. Let's grab this piece here, detach. Detach with, it's just, we're detaching just a separate piece from that mesh. Let's rename it underscore low, and go ahead and go under hierarchy, effect pivot only, centered object, and then under X, just right click the top arrow to center on 0. And I'll go ahead and stop saying that now because I think you've got it. So turn on effect pivot only off, and then let's go ahead and delete this piece because we no longer need it. And select this piece again and mirror it over. Okay, and we want to reset X-forms on it again. Convert to editable poly. Go to object properties, enable backface culling, and inverted normals again. So we'll go ahead and flip those. And we're good with that piece. Now we just need to attach it. So I'll go ahead and select both those pieces, isolate it, grab this piece on the left with the correct name, and attach it to this piece. Okay. So what do we got left? We've got these. We just had this strap here and then that piece right there, I believe. So I think it works better just unhiding the high, grabbing the name, and then detaching the piece and then renaming it a little quicker. So a little bit of lag in between, going between those layers just because there's so much geometry. So let's detach that, rename it to low. Okay, that takes care of that piece. Let's grab our high. Sorry, I was doing this. There we go. Grab this piece. And we'll go ahead and that should actually be its own piece. Let's go ahead and just scroll out here. Let's center its pivot like so. And I'm just going to move it up a little bit, make sure that we don't have any other pieces moving with it. Yep, so that's just the last piece. So that's named correctly. We should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and take a break here, but then we'll come back and start working on this bottom piece of the katana. Alright, so we're running a little long on this video, so I'm going to go ahead and just address a few things that I missed on this piece, and then we'll save doing this for another video. So one of the first things we need to look at is in the video, the last part, I didn't name this piece after detaching it, so you're going to want to double check that you name that correctly. So in this case, it's a BK grip underscore low. So go ahead and name that properly. And here on the blade and a few other pieces, we need to set up the smooth groups properly so that the normal map bakes onto it correctly. So there's a really cool feature in text tools for doing that. So let's go ahead and open that up real quick. And then let's go into our unwrap modifier. Go ahead and click that. And then if you go over here to tools, you can click smooth groups from UV shells. And that's going to go ahead and create the correct smooth groups based on our UV shells so that we get a good normal map bake from Substance Painter or whatever program you're using to bake out your normal maps. So we'll go ahead and click that, and that's going to go through and create an edit poly modifier with the correct smooth groups. And that's all we need to do. So let's go ahead and convert that to an editable poly now. And we just need to go through now and just do that for each of these pieces. So unwrap modifier, tools, smooth group from UV shells, and convert that to an editable poly. And then we've got these pieces here. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right. Make sure you convert it to an editable poly. So unwrap modifier, tools, smooth groups from UV shells, convert to editable poly. I think it would actually be kind of nice if you could just click tools with that object selected, and it would just create a UV map and then apply that change. I'm actually going to test that real quick to see if it actually does. I haven't ever tried that. Oh, yeah, it does. It works. All right, that's new to me. Okay, that saves a little bit of work, or a little, like a few less clicks. So we'll go ahead and do each piece like that. And we should also probably, let's go ahead and do that real quick, and let's double check that it's not doing anything strange to our unwrap. Because as much as these tools are nice, sometimes they can produce some bad results. So go ahead and do this piece next. Oh, now we don't want resize canvas. Okay. And that leaves the strap and that piece there. Alright, so that's all our pieces. And we can go ahead and take a look at the smooth groups that it produced on this. You can kind of see, so like where we have a UV break, anywhere we have a break in our UV shells, you can see it produced kind of more of a hard edge. It looks pretty bad here, just in max, but when we bake our normal map out, we'll have a nice smooth transition between those shells. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. In the next video, we'll start unwrapping this piece.